I've known Marcus for as long as I can remember. Our story began back in middle school, two kids thrown together on a basketball court who quickly realized they worked better as a team than against each other. From then on, he became more than just my best friend. He was the person I measured every friendship against. Loyal, easygoing, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. I always admired that about him, maybe more than I should have. On the surface, Marcus was the definition of straight confidence. He dated cheerleaders, went to prom with the kind of girls people whispered about, and never seemed to question himself the way I did. I was the quieter one, the observer. People liked me well enough, but I didn't pull crowds toward me like he did. I was comfortable in his shadow, even if it meant hiding the one truth I never had the courage to say out loud. That truth was simple, yet impossible. I had feelings for Marcus. Not fleeting, not shallow. Deep, longing that had been building for years, layered beneath every smile, every late-night conversation, every casual touch he never thought twice about. I told myself it was just friendship, that admiration had blurred into something else, but deep down I knew better. I loved him, but Marcus wasn't someone I could ever confess to. He'd always been so certain of who he was, so rooted in the life people expected of him. He liked women. He joked about future kids and a wife who would be as effortlessly beautiful as he was handsome. I stayed silent, playing the role of the best friend, laughing at his jokes, listening to his stories, and guarding my heart behind layers of restraint. It was safer that way. College didn't change much between us. We went to the same university, joined the same gym, and made the sauna part of our weekly ritual after workouts. At first, it was just a place to sweat out exhaustion, but over time it became something else, a kind of sanctuary. The dim heat, the quiet hum of steam filling the air, the absence of phones and distractions. It was one of the only places where our conversations stripped down as much as our bodies. No walls, no masks, just us. That's why, when I think about how it all began, I realize the sauna wasn't just a backdrop. It was the stage for everything that followed. There was something about that room, hot, hazy, intimate, that made words hang heavier, confessions slip out more easily. It was as though the steam blurred the world outside, leaving only what we dared to reveal inside. Still, for years, I never let the truth escape. I would sit across from him, towel draped around his shoulders, his skin damp with sweat, and force myself to look away when my thoughts wandered too far. I told myself it was just the heat making my chest tighten, just exhaustion, making my pulse race when our eyes locked a second too long. The conflict I lived with wasn't just about loving him, it was about the fear of losing him if he ever knew. Marcus was my anchor. The thought of him recoiling, pulling away, treating me like a stranger, it was unbearable. So I swallowed my feelings and learned to live with the ache of pretending. But as much as I tried to bury it, the truth had a way of pressing against the surface, demanding cracks in my silence. I noticed it in small ways. The way my laughter sounded different when he was the one making me smile, the way I paid attention to every word he said, even when it was nonsense, the way my mood shifted depending on how much time he gave me. Marcus was the center of my world, and he didn't even know it. The irony was that he trusted me with everything. I was the person he came to when his heart was broken, when a girl cheated on him, when he didn't know what to do with his life. He called me his brother, his rock, and every time I nodded, listened, comforted him, while a piece of me twisted inside, because I wanted to be more than that. The night it all began was like any other. We'd finished a brutal session at the gym, our muscles aching, our shirts clinging to us with sweat. The sauna was waiting, promising relief. We stepped inside, letting the steam engulf us, towels loose around our waists. It should have been routine, sit, relax, talk about the game or the classes we hated. But that night felt different, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the silence between us, heavier than usual. Maybe it was the way Marcus kept glancing at me, as if weighing something unspoken. Or maybe it was just that I'd grown tired of living inside my own cage, of carrying feelings that never saw daylight. Whatever it was, something shifted. As the heat pressed against my skin and my chest rose with uneven breaths, I sensed that this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. There was a tension in the air, fragile and sharp, like a wire stretched too tight. I didn't know what would break first, my silence or his. All I knew was that I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't name, and once I stepped over, nothing would ever be the same again. The steam curled around us like a veil, cloaking everything in a heavy haze. Marcus leaned back against the wooden bench, eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. I should have been relaxed too, but my mind wouldn't let me. Something about the silence felt charged, as if words were waiting in the air between us, daring one of us to catch them. "Man, you really never date anyone, do you?" Marcus finally said, his voice low, casual, but carrying more weight than he realized. I froze, caught off guard. He had asked before, usually with a teasing grin, but this time felt different. There was no humor in his tone, no smirk tugging at his lips. He was watching me, waiting for an answer I'd never been brave enough to give. I tried to shrug it off. "Guess I just don't feel like it," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice. "Not a priority." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Not a priority? You're 21, Jordan. Come on. You've got to be into someone." I looked away, focusing on the drops of condensation sliding down the wooden walls. My chest tightened. He didn't know how close he was cutting to the truth, how every deflection cost me a piece of myself. I wanted to tell him, wanted to spill everything that burned inside me, but the risk loomed larger than the relief. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You've been my best friend for years, and I've never even seen you try. Not once. It's weird, man." The words stung, though I knew he didn't mean it cruelly. Weird. Different. Not normal. Words I'd whispered to myself in my darkest moments. My throat felt dry, and not from heat. "You ever think maybe I'm just not like you?" I said, finally, my voice quiet, almost drowned out by the hiss of steam. Marcus tilted his head, studying me. "Not like me, how?" I hesitated, every instinct telling me to pull back, to laugh it off, to bury the truth where it had always lived. But something about the moment, the closeness, the heat, the way he wasn't letting me dodge, made it impossible to hide. My pulse thundered in my ears. "I don't feel the same way about girls as you do," I whispered, forcing the words out before I could swallow them back. The silence that followed was suffocating. My heart slammed against my ribs as if it wanted to escape. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak, and the longer he stayed quiet, the more certain I became that I had just destroyed everything. Then, to my surprise, he let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "I kind of wondered," he said softly. My head snapped up. "You what?" He gave a half smile, though there was no mockery in it. "I don't know. The way you are sometimes. I always figured maybe there was something you weren't saying." He leaned back again, eyes on the ceiling. "Doesn't bother me, if that's what you're worried about." I didn't know what to do with his words. Part of me wanted to believe him, to sink into the comfort of acceptance, but another part braced for the inevitable rejection. "So, you're not freaked out?" "Freaked out? No," he said, shaking his head. "Honestly, I think about stuff like that sometimes, too." The words hit me harder than I expected. "You do?" Marcus nodded, though he avoided my gaze. "I mean, I've always dated girls, yeah. But there've been moments, thoughts I didn't really know what to do with. I just brushed them off. Told myself I was straight, end of story." The heat seemed to thicken around us. My chest felt heavy, torn between disbelief and a dangerous flicker of hope. I had spent years convincing myself Marcus could never, ever feel anything beyond friendship for me. And now he was confessing he wasn't as certain as he'd always seemed. "You never said anything," I murmured. "Who would I tell?" He let out a humorless laugh. "You think the guys on the team would have let me live it down? My dad." He shook his head. "You're the only person I could even say this to." Something shifted in me then. For years, Marcus had been the untouchable one, the confident one, the person who seemed to have it all figured out. But in that moment, sitting half-naked in a foggy sauna, He looked as uncertain as I'd ever seen him. Vulnerable. Human. And it made my heart ache even more. The air between us grew heavier, as though the steam itself was holding its breath. His words lingered, echoing in the corners of my mind. I think about stuff like that sometimes, too. I wanted to ask what he meant, how far those thoughts had gone, if they included me. But I was afraid of the answer, afraid of opening a door I couldn't close. Instead, I sat in silence, watching him, memorizing the curve of his shoulders, the way his hair clung damply to his forehead. Every detail burned itself into me, a reminder of how close he was, how untouchable he remained. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Maybe I've been lying to myself more than I thought," he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to the steam instead of me. My breath caught. It wasn't a declaration, not even a promise. But it was enough to shake the foundation I'd built my life around. If Marcus wasn't as sure of himself as I believed, then maybe, just maybe, what I felt wasn't as impossible as I'd always feared. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My thoughts were a storm, colliding and spinning until I couldn't tell hope from fear. All I knew was that something had cracked open between us, and once exposed, it couldn't be buried again. As the steam swirled and the silence stretched, I realized we were teetering on the edge of something fragile and dangerous, and no matter what happened next, our friendship would never be the same. The days after that conversation in the sauna felt like walking through a dream I couldn't wake from. Everything looked the same: classes, gym sessions, our late-night coffee runs, but beneath the familiar rhythm was a current I couldn't ignore. It was in the pauses between words, in the way Marcus lingered when our eyes met, in the silence that now carried questions neither of us dared to voice. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting my own longing onto him. But then he'd do something small, rest his hand on my shoulder a little longer than usual, bump his knee against mine beneath the table, sit closer than he needed to, and my heart would betray me all over again. One night, after we'd finished a workout, Marcus suggested the sauna again. I almost said no, afraid of what that room might draw out of us, but the truth was I couldn't resist. The memory of our last talk still played in my head like a song stuck on repeat. I wanted more, even if I was terrified of what more meant. The moment we stepped inside, the steam wrapped around us like an old secret. Marcus dropped onto the bench beside me instead of across from me. I felt the heat of his body, even through the thick air, my skin alive with awareness. He sat quietly for a while, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Then, without looking at me, he said, "I've been thinking about what I told you." My throat tightened. Yeah. He rubbed the back of his neck, sweat beading across his skin. I meant it. About wondering. About not being sure. I've always been honest with myself. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "And what does that mean for you?" He finally turned to me, his gaze steady. "I don't know, but I keep coming back to that night, to the fact that I could tell you, and it felt real. Like I wasn't pretending." My chest ached with the weight of his words. I wanted to believe they were leading somewhere I'd dreamed of for years. But doubt coiled inside me. I'd seen Marcus with girls, seen how easily he fit into that world. How could I ever compete with that? "You don't have to have everything figured out right now," I said softly. "It's okay not to know." Marcus nodded, but his expression didn't ease. "Maybe, but I do know one thing." He hesitated, then added, "I don't want to lose what we have. You're the one person I can be honest with. If I screw that up, I don't know what I'd do." I forced a smile, though my heart was trembling. "You're not going to lose me." The words were true, but they carried a danger he didn't realize. Because the closer he pulled me into his uncertainty, the harder it became for me to hold back my own truth. Over the next week, the tension grew unbearable. We went out for burgers, studied late, in the library, shot hoops at the rec center, everything we always did. But now, every laugh, every glance, every touch felt amplified, charged. I caught myself memorizing the curve of his grin, the way his hand brushed mine when we passed a soda across the table. One evening, we sat in my dorm room, A movie playing unwatched on the screen. Marcus stretched out on the bed beside me, his arm draped casually over the back of my shoulders. I could feel the warmth of him seeping into me, and it was all I could do to keep breathing evenly. Halfway through the movie, he shifted closer. Our knees touched, and he didn't move away. His hand slipped down, brushing against mine, lingering there as if testing the weight of silence. My pulse hammered. I wanted to reach back, to intertwine my fingers with his, but fear rooted me in place. Finally, he whispered, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different?" I turned to him slowly, my heart in my throat. Different how? His eyes searched mine, uncertain yet determined. If we weren't just friends, the words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. I couldn't breathe. All the years of silence, of unspoken longing, came crashing into that single moment. "Marcus?" I started, but the rest of the sentence caught in my throat. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "Forget it. I shouldn't have said that." "No," I said quickly, the word sharper than I intended. "Don't take it back." His eyes snapped back to mine, wide and searching. Neither of us moved, trapped in a silence that pulsed with everything we couldn't say. Then, slowly, Marcus exhaled. If I cross this line, I don't think I can ever go back. The world seemed to narrow to just that moment, just him. My chest burned, not from the steam or the heat, but from the weight of everything I'd hidden for so long. I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I could do was hold his gaze, hoping he could read in my silence what I was too afraid to put into words. The movie played on, forgotten. Marcus leaned back beside me, but the distance between us felt smaller than ever. The line had been drawn, and we were standing on its edge, teetering, waiting. I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that whatever happened next would change everything. In the days that followed, I let myself believe in possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. Marcus and I spent more time together than ever, and everything between us felt changed. Our conversations slipped into deeper waters, filled with pauses that spoke louder than words. The small touches he used to brush off so casually lingered now, his hand brushing mine, his shoulder pressing into me like a silent confession. For the first time in years, I thought maybe, just maybe, he could feel what I felt. That fragile hope grew each time he leaned closer, each time his voice softened when it was just us. I told myself this was more than friendship, that the line we'd been dancing around for so long was about to be crossed for real. But hope is dangerous. It blinds you to the cracks you don't see. It happened on a Friday night. I'd skipped a campus party to hang out with Marcus, only to find him already gone. His roommate casually mentioned he'd gone with some girl from his business class, that they'd been getting close. My stomach dropped, but I convinced myself it was nothing, that maybe it was just him trying to figure himself out. The next day, though, I saw them together, Marcus with his arm around her, laughing like the world had never been complicated. I froze, every part of me unraveling. To anyone else, it was just Marcus being Marcus, the same guy he'd always been. But to me, it was betrayal. After everything he'd said in the sauna, after the nights of lingering touches and whispered what-ifs, he was already back in the world that had no space for me. I tried to shake it off, but the hurt burrowed deep. When I finally confronted him, it was late at night in my dorm. He walked in grinning, but his smile faltered when he saw my face. "You didn't tell me you were seeing someone," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Marcus blinked, then sighed. "Jordan, come on. It's not serious. We've just been hanging out." "Hanging out? You kissed me with your words, Marcus. You made me think." I stopped, the weight of it all crushing my chest. "You made me think I meant something more." He rubbed his temples, looking torn. "You do mean something more. You're my best friend. That hasn't changed." "That's not enough." The words ripped out of me before I could stop them. "You opened the door, Marcus. You let me believe you were feeling what I'd been feeling for years. And now you're acting like it was just some experiment." His expression hardened, though guilt flickered in his eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was confused, okay? I still am. I thought maybe I could feel that way. But then, I don't know. With her, it's easier. It's normal. Normal. The word hit me like a punch. I felt myself crumble inside, my fears spilling into reality. All along, I'd worried I could never be enough compared to the version of him the world wanted. And now here was proof. So, I was just what? My voice cracked. A safe place to test the waters? Someone to unload your secrets on before you went back to pretending? He shook his head quickly. No, it wasn't like that. I swear it wasn't. You mean more to me than anyone else, Jordan. But I don't know how to make sense of it. I stared at him, my chest heavy with grief. He didn't understand. Maybe he never would. To him, it was confusion, a fleeting moment in the fog of a sauna. But to me, it was everything. Years of silence, years of love I'd buried, only to have it pulled into the light and dismissed as uncertainty. I wanted to scream, to make him feel the weight of what he'd taken from me. But instead, I just shook my head. You don't get to play with my heart like that. You don't get to pretend none of it mattered. He stepped closer, his voice pleading. Jordan, please, don't walk away from me. I met his eyes one last time, searching for something, regret, love, anything that could undo the ache in my chest. But all I saw was fear. Fear of himself. Fear of me. Fear of the truth he wasn't ready to face. So I did the only thing I could. I walked away. The silence in my dorm that night was suffocating, but it was honest. For the first time, I stopped lying to myself. Marcus would always be the boy I loved, the boy who showed me pieces of himself he couldn't bear to keep, but he would never be mine. Not really. And yet, in a strange way, I realized he had given me something valuable. His words, his hesitation, his half-confession in that sauna, they had opened my eyes, not to the future I wanted, but to the truth I needed, that I couldn't keep waiting for someone who wasn't ready to love me back, that I deserved more than stolen moments and broken promises. When I think back to that night in the sauna, I see it differently now. It wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the breaking point that forced me to step into my own. I walked out of that heat-filled room carrying both heartbreak and clarity. Broken, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But also awake to who I was, and to the kind of love I would no longer settle for less than. And as painful as it was, maybe that was exactly the truth I needed to find.